Pokémon XD Gale of Darkness came out 20 years ago and I've always wanted to play it. But how does it hold up in 2025? Well, you'll have to stick around to find out. The game begins with a strange-looking Lugia lifting a ship out of the sea and taking it along for a ride. We're then introduced to our main character, who's of course a young lad, in true Pokémon fashion. There's been a sudden outbreak of shadow Pokémon in the region, which are Pokémon that's hearts have been artificially corrupted. This strips them of their emotions with their only desire being to battle, and they won't hesitate to attack humans either. Professor Crane tasks us with finding out who's creating the shadow Pokémon and their reason for doing so. We also need to figure out a way to restore shadow Pokémon back to their normal selves. Your starter Pokémon is an Eevee. There's no option to choose from free like in the mainline games. However, you will have the option to choose what your Eevee evolves into later in the game. You've got a PDA which tracks all of the Pokémon you've seen, emails from NPCs, and a few other features that we'll go into later. I'm not sure why they didn't just call it a Pokédex, but we all know its real name. There's an overworld map system that allows travel to and from locations which you do on a moped. Yes, you're like 10 years old and have a moped, which is pretty cool. There's no chance my parents would have got me a moped at that age. If they did, social services would be knocking at my door. You'll spend 2/3 of the game battling trainers, which are all in the doubles format. Now, I prefer playing singles and didn't know this before I started playing the game, but if you play VGC, then you'll feel at home with XD. That isn't a negative though. I did enjoy the double battles, as well as the strategies that can be utilised. Now, I'm going to assume that most people watching this are clued up on Pokemon, so I'm not going to explain battle mechanics, type matchups, and the rest of it. We find out that Team Cypher are responsible for creating shadow Pokemon, and they of course want to use them to take over the world. A bunch of grown men and women wearing skin-tight suits trying to steal Pokemon. A very popular career choice in the Pokemon universe. You'll be running into these guys non-stop and they'll always entertain you with a battle. Now, most of them have shadow Pokemon, but guess what? We can catch them. We're given a snag machine, which is a futuristic looking arm piece that allows us to catch Shadowmons. No, you can't use it to steal regular trainers' Pokemon, not that an upstanding citizen like me would try to do anything like that. After capturing a Shadowmon, we still have the issue of them being corrupted. This removes some of their move slots in favour of Shadow moves, and also adds reverse mode which makes them take chip damage. This is obviously not ideal, but we've got a few options to return them back to normal. The first is the Relic Stone, which lets you purify one Pokemon at a time. Later in the game you gain access to the Purify Chamber, which allows you to purify multiple Pokemon at the same time. Now, I wasn't a fan of this mechanic for a few reasons. The first being that once you've captured a Pokemon, you have to use them with a nerfed moveset. Then you have to wait for their Shadow Heart Gauge to decrease to 0 before you can finally travel to the Relic Stone to purify them. They also go into reverse mode where they basically hit themselves in confusion unless you call out to them. But when you do call to them, this takes up your turn so you don't get anything out of it. The Purify Chamber is even worse than the Relic Stone. The one benefit is you can purify several Pokemon at once, but you need to put regular Pokemon in the chamber with them. But that wasn't the problem. It took hours for some Pokemon to be purified. You get a notification on your PDA when they're ready to be collected, but at this point you'd had Pokemon that were a much higher level. This meant that I pretty much stuck to the same team throughout the game. I am aware of the Purify Chamber mechanics and there are ways to speed up the process, but for your average gamer that isn't using a guide, which wouldn't have been as accessible in 2005, you're basically capturing Pokemon with extra steps, like that episode of Rick and Morty. I was surprised with how many locations there are to visit, with the map being stacked full of areas towards the end of the game. Now, each location is relatively small, with them having one spot you need to go to progress the story. The rest is filled with NPCs that have limited dialogue, a Pokemon and center, as well as trainers that can be battled. Each area looks unique and has its own feel. There's Agate Village, a small forest with a waterfall running through the middle, Gateon Port, a seaside city with some sailors you can battle, and Pyrite Town, which is covered in mining debris and rusty buildings. It's worthwhile to battle every trainer along the way to level up your Pokemon. Trainers in cities won't automatically battle you when walking past, you'll have to talk to them first. But that doesn't mean this game isn't stacked full of mandatory battles, but I'll touch on those a little later. I also recommend speaking to all of the NPCs that you come across. This guy offers you an Evolution Stone an hour into the game. I went for Espeon, but I wanted Umbreon. I didn't feel like Toxic and Protect stalling my way through the game though, baby. I did have to wait for Eevee's friendliness to raise, but this took no time at all. I was also surprised that trainers let me steal their Pokemon and didn't even seem to care. They seemed more annoyed about losing the battle, but me taking their mons, oh no, that's fine. There's a move tutor in Agate Village, but the moves aren't the greatest. I feel like they had Chansey in mind with T-Wave and Seismic Toss. I lost all respect for this old man when I saw he owned a Wobbuffet. That's an Uber in this gen, buddy, not cool. You'll eventually have to visit Mount Battle, an active volcano where trainers go to test their skills. There are 10 areas which have 10 trainers. That means this challenge requires you to beat 100 trainers. Now, you don't have to beat them all in a row, as you can be teleported out by an Abra and continue from the front desk. You can earn Poke Coupons which can be used to buy TMs and hold items, delete moves as well as relearn them. I got to Area 5 before I was defeated as the other trainer's Pokemon were so much higher than mine. The Poke Coupon prices for everything are crazy. All I wanted was Psychic for Espeon and a Choice Band for one of my physical mons, but I wasn't willing to grind for hours. And yes, you heard me correctly, these geniuses are battling on an open volcano, one of if not the most dangerous places to battle. My in-game mum is cool with me riding around on a moped going into an active volcano and being mugged by petty thieves, but that's the life of a Pokemon trainer, baby. The first 10 hours of the game are easy, as you're mostly one-shotting other trainers' Pokemon. Now my mons were faster, meaning they got to attack first, and they were the same level or higher than other trainers' mons. People's reason for battling are so trivial. You'll hear things like, I don't like you, let's battle. I want to test out your skills, let's battle. You've been banging my wife, well you better believe that's a battle. It reminds me of Yakuza games where everything ends up in a fistfight. I didn't like that you can't skip animations or speed them up whilst in battle. Having to watch 4 Pokemon's move animations each turn started to get old real quick. Especially since this is what you're going to be doing the majority of the game, but it can be endured during the early parts. There's plenty of underground labs and hideouts that you'll be breaking into, which follow the Pokemon formula of having multiple floors, several trainers, and a tough opponent at the end. It was a great idea having heal stations in these hideouts, meaning you don't have to backtrack to a Poke Center and then travel all the way back. The game does start to get more enjoyable when your Pokemon start evolving, they learn new moves, and your team composition starts to fall into place. There is a lack of TMs though, as all the good ones are locked behind the Colosseum shop, which you need Poke Coupons for. There is another store that sells some strong low accuracy moves, as well as dual screens, but that's pretty much it. You're rewarded random TMs from winning in the Colosseum, but there's no guarantee it'll be useful and you only get one. This means that you can get stuck with shitty moves throughout the game unless you want to grind. You can feel the game's age here, especially if you're coming from the recent mainline games where TMs are easy to obtain and you can use them infinitely. Using your snag machine to steal Shadow Mons isn't the only way to get new Pokemon. You can visit Poke Spots and place a lure down to attract wild Mons. You'll then get a notification on your PDA when a Mon has appeared. If you don't drop what you're doing immediately and go to the spot, the Mon will run off and steal the lure. This is pretty lame when you're in the middle of a hideout and don't want to backtrack. You'll more than likely run into a wild Hoppip that you don't want anyways. Realgam Tower allows you to play bingo, use the battle simulator as well as Colosseum battles. Poke Bingo is pretty mid and I won't bore you with the details, and the battle simulator, well that was just there. The whole section was a long and boring tutorial to introduce you to Colosseum battles, which at that point you can't even access. They were a bit of added fluff and an alternative way of getting Poke Coupons, but I don't think anyone would have cared if it was removed. It wouldn't be too bad if you're awarded a good number of coupons, but you're only throwing a few pennies for your time. I'll talk about Colosseum battles a little later in the video. Now earlier in the review I touched on the number of battles that are in the game. It really starts to drag when you realise it's battle after battle with a hint of battle sprinkled on top. Just to preface, I've played every single mainline game from Gen 1 to Gen 9, from the original Game Boy to the Switch, and I've never played any of these games and thought, wow, there's too many battles, but this game feels like a fucking battle simulator. I would have preferred tougher battles with less of them than loads of battles that pad the game out, and that's exactly what they are, padding. I have no issue sinking over 100 hours into a game, specifically RPGs which find a way to keep you engaged. So this isn't an issue of the amount of time the game takes to complete, it's what you're doing with that time that I have an issue with. Because the areas are so small, the game was oversaturated with trainers to artificially extend my playtime. With that said, the game does spike in difficulty in Phoenix City. Now I don't mind this, as the battle itself wasn't tough, it was the fact I had to battle this guy directly after a tough battle without having the chance to heal. This meant I was facing a full team with most of my mons being knocked out or really low on HP. It was a bit cheap, yes, but I had been asking for tougher battles, so I will take it. I also don't understand our allies, as they keep forgetting who we are and treating us like a criminal. We've seen them several times at this point and they insist on battling us every single time. After you beat him, they suddenly remember, he's the kid that's helping us save the world. How many kids with red hair in this outfit are you seeing that you don't remember me? I get that they have to be creative and think of goofy ways to force a battle, but this one was stupid. There is a daycare where you can leave your mons to raise their levels. Like the mainline games, you can only leave one mon with them at a time. I left the Donphan with them halfway through the game and was hoping it would get to a decent level. I went back to pick the Donphan up towards the end of the game and all of my Pokemon were still a higher level than it. It's a handy feature, but don't expect it to do wonders. You meet an NPC that tells you their Bonsly has gone missing and they ask you to help find them. After completing the quest and returning the Bonsly, he gave me a fucking bingo card. Yes, a card for one of the worst features in the game. Not a TM I desperately needed or a good held item, a bingo card. This Robo-Kyogre boat was pretty cool, and yes, you can use it. But this also begs another question. Why are they trusting a sea vessel to a small child? I'm clearly too young to be able to navigate the instruments of a craft, yet they encouraged me to sail the seas, baby. Now, I did get to a point in the story where trainers' Pokemon were getting higher and higher until it reached a point where they were 9 levels higher than me. This made some of the battles incredibly difficult. I wasn't skipping any of the optional trainers either. I battled everyone I could and I was still underleveled. I knew that I had to grind levels in order to beat the game, so let's go ahead and take a look into Colosseum battles. There are 3 Colosseums you gain access to throughout the story, and you'll need to beat 4 trainers in a row to win the tournament. You'll also get a cash prize and 1 TM for winning. Now, all Colosseums follow the same rules but have different levels of Pokemon. I didn't play any of the Colosseums when they became available, so that may have contributed to me being underleveled, but there's no way I would have gained 9 levels for completing them once, so I think the grinding was inevitable. After several hours of grinding, I was able to go back and challenge some trainers and complete the game. There is some post-game content in the form of the Orre Colosseum, but this place is no walk in the park as the teams are significantly higher than yours at level 60. You're also limited to 4 Pokemon, so you can't simply overwhelm them by bringing 6. Now, I knew I was going to get destroyed, but I'm reviewing the game, so we gave it a try. You're also free to tie up any loose ends, whether that be capturing other shadow Pokemon, rebattling certain trainers, and of course taking part in Colosseum battles. You can also transfer Pokemon between the Gen 3 games, but you'll need a Game Boy Advance and a link cable. It won't work if you're playing XD on a Wii. I highly doubt anyone's going to be doing this, but it is possible. The graphics were the standard for the time, especially on the Gamecube, and I think they've held up okay. Some of the animations are actually better than what we've had in recent years, and remember, this game came out in 2005. Some Pokemon models are a bit off, but this wasn't the end of the world. The dialogue when speaking to NPCs was also questionable. Some would constantly refer to themselves in third person, and others would phrase their questions in a strange way. I can only assume these were localization issues. The music is also great, and I still hear several of the tracks to this day in other videos. It took me 37 hours to see what Gale of Darkness had to offer. However, I believe the game was padded out with extra trainer battles as well as the need to grind. The story wasn't anything special and follows the same cliche of a team using Pokemon to try and overthrow the world. The battles are fun for the most part, and they should be, considering that's what you're going to be doing for the most part. As of writing, the game will set you back over $300 or £250, but there are alternative ways of playing the game. Now, this is a great title to have in the collection, but the gameplay itself doesn't merit the price tag. I did enjoy the game, but was frustrated with the amount of padding. If this was a 20-hour game that cut out the additional fluff, I'd give it a high rating, but as it stands, it's just average, so I'm giving it a 7 out of 10. If you're a die-hard Pokemon fan or you're building a Gamecube collection, then I would recommend picking the game up. For the completionists out there, it will take you approximately 70 hours to 100% the game. For everyone else, I recommend finding an alternative way to play it or give it a miss. If you want to spend some money on a retro Pokemon game, buy Heart Gold or Soul Silver, or Black and White, as they're worth every penny. Would you like to see more retro games on the channel? If so, let me know in the comments. Ladies and gents, subs and non-subs, thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, you know what to do. You've heard it all a million times. All of my socials can be found in my description. And remember, I'll never be a real YouTuber until I've released an apology video. Or 2. That's all, guys. Peace out.